Oftentimes, we talk about digital transformations in the context of the digital elite organizations, the Netflix, the Facebooks, the FANGs. But I want to talk to you here about a very significant digital transformation that Walmart made. Walmart is a more of a traditional company, has been around for a long time, and has many of the components of traditional enterprise companies. And so it is something that's more tangible than many of the things that the digital elite do. And the transformation that I want to talk about here is the transformation that they made around their web stack. They went from Java handlebars and Backbone to React and Node. And if you're familiar with these technologies, you know that this is like changing religion. It's going from the very traditional technologies such as Java. Some of you might think back to the 90s, to the fights between Microsoft and Sun. And a lot of that legacy and a lot of that talent still carries a lot of that mindset. And some of the challenges that come with that is productivity and just a stack that is not as performant as the ones that grew up with the web or the modern web in mind, that are technologies such as Node.js and React. And the task that they set out to do as well was one that was a serious undertaking. This is a mid-tier type of approach. It's certainly not the small enterprise. It's not Google, but it's a challenge within itself. It's 10,000 requests per second. It's 400 engineers that, if this transformation was successful, needed to be retrained. The property that was going to be addressed was walmart.com. This is over 2 dozen sites, not just one site. And as mentioned, that huge change when it came to the entire stack, the skills that are needed, and in general, just a fundamental change. Why did they set out to do this? They had hit a wall. This often happens within technology stacks. You hit limitations, you hit boundaries of that ecosystem, and eventually you need to rebuild from the ground up. In this case, handlebars and Backbone and Java simply weren't providing them with the productivity that they needed to have. There was also a lot of performance issues. When it came to the mobile applications, 50% of their users when they started were already on mobile. And as those code bases grew, the performance was certainly an issue. Also, the complexity when it came to dealing with state on the front end, on some of the tool sets that they were using, there were much better solutions like Redux. So overall, this is something that needed to be done. Now, when it comes to their first steps, this is something that they did differently. When it comes to looking at the best practices, a lot of them recommend start small, start with a small project, build from there, and then leverage those wins and extend to the rest of the organization. They did it backwards. They started with a platform. They started with a small team of very strong developers that covered the entire stack, that covered front end to back end, really that spanned the range of capabilities and that could really address any problem. However, because they started out with platform first, they had to address the questions of this migration, of this transformation. A lot of the leaders often look at technology redesigns as coming up with the same thing, having foregone a lot of features, having foregone delays, and really not ending up in with any advantages or any advantages from their perspective. And so these were a lot of the questions that were being asked. What are we going to gain? What new features are going to be delayed? What is the business impact? And on. And their strategy was to do preemptive conversations, to start with the leadership and go up and down the stacks, managers, product managers, directors, vice presidents, and try to address that anxiety, to try to prevent this from propagating throughout the organization, to do that evangelizing, if you would, of why this was a good decision and why this would provide not just technical advantage, but business advantage as well. Another thing that they did is they created a vertical team of very senior people with good communication skills that had experience, so that when the inevitable problems came up, they were not phased, and they oftentimes saw them as opportunities. Also, they were able to provide good feedback, recommendations and improvements, recommendations on modifications. And once this got traction, they were able to leverage this expertise to be able to scale their team. Their team was very small, only 6 people as mentioned. The other thing that they started with, in addition to building the platform, was a first small concept, and they chose the bathroom set of the site. If you are on the Walmart site, and this was chosen because it was something of small impact. It could be a good proof of concept. It had low traffic, less than 1% of the traffic on the site, and it would allow them to work through all of the challenges that come with making a drastic change on platform. Now, that was successful, and from there, once again, as opposed to a lot of what you see of building on those small wins, they went big. They went to the biggest component of the site that could be had, which was the shopping cart. Anything that was successful when it came to a customer and led to a purchase touched the next project that they challenged. Now, as you might imagine, this was a very good team. It had good support. It had a good vertical team in addition to that. And they were feeling very confident, and that was quite successful. And so they were able to pull this off, at which point the rest of the organization, the rest of the site, all of it came on board. And now they had the challenges of being able to scale that small team, that platform, which in other types of progressions, oftentimes after a few wins, when they determine what everybody needs, becomes the center of excellence. But in this case, they started with that, and now they had the challenge to be able to address that internal scale, those internal demands, right? To be able to retrain the 400 engineers, to handle the feature requests, the bug fixes, the retraining architecture questions, and just a lot of people needing to touch base with them. And here's where the ambassador's role really came through. The ambassadors not only were senior, they were also chosen strategically to come from many of the business units. And when it came to this part of that migration, they were able to leverage those expertise, those contacts, that confidence in those individuals, and they were able to scale that small team. The impact was significant when you think about the technical aspects. 90% functional automation, the package size went down by 40%. Whenever you have less code, you have less to maintain, you have less to break, so that's always good. Also, the performance went up significantly. The landing page, for example, the performance went up 60%. And as usually the case, the improved customer experience translated to business value. The other thing as well, and this is not a minor gain, is that there was a tremendous impact when it came to the training of the workforce. They were able to retrain 400 engineers from Java to the JavaScript ecosystem of tools in a much faster way. The traditional education for new employees to the group was 5 days of a deep dive into Java. Because of the agility of this platform, because of the productivity of this ecosystem, they were able to do the same in 1 day. When it came to new hires, they were able to accelerate the rate of productivity that a new hire had. Typically, from the time they were hired to the time they were able to do their first commit took 3 weeks in time. They had to do a week of training, as mentioned. They had to go on the 2 weeks release cycle on the old platform. And when it came to the new stack, they were able to do all of that in a single day. There was a tremendous amount of agility, a huge impact into the culture, a huge step forward when it came to being able to innovate and to change rapidly. Also, as well, whenever new employees came on board, a lot of them already had some platform knowledge. The platform that they created, they open source, and it's still open source and available to everyone. And so they were able, in fact, to go to the market and consider candidates that already were trained on their platform. And so their training became more about the organizational processes than the technology itself. And so that was a huge, huge win. The results were that in less than a year, in approximately 10 months, they were able to switch onto this new platform about 70% of their site. And they already had 100% ready to go, but they were just waiting for the holiday period to be able to do the rest. So this is not a simple transformation. This is a significant transformation by a traditional enterprise company that had a traditional workforce and that was able to make that transformation in less than a year. So that's pretty remarkable. The other thing that I'll mention here, as I've mentioned a few times, is that they do not have the elite engineers of Silicon Valley. If you have good people, you can insource. You can train internally. And if you do not have good people, you're going to have problems anyway. The other thing is that if you have good people and you can retrain, that institutional knowledge is very valuable. It takes a very long time. And so I'll close with this quote by a famous architect from Netflix called Adrian Cockcroft, who was once told by an architect, "We can't copy Netflix because we don't have the people." And his response was, "Where do you think they used to work? We hired them from you." And so take that to mind and consider these changes and consider these possibilities and this potential.